Sadhu, sadhu. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Buddhang saranang gacchami. Dhammang saranang gacchami. Sangham saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Dutiyampi sangham saranang gacchami. Satiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami. Satiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami. Satyampi sangham saranang gacchami. Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Adinnadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Kamesu micchācara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Surameraya majjapamadatthana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. As I always do, before I start the Dhamma discussion, there is one important point I like to make. All the Buddha Dhamma that I am explaining in this Dhamma discussion, I have taken from the oldest Tripitaka in the world, which is kept at the British Library in London. Now, this Tripitaka has been written down in Sri Lanka 456 years after Lord Buddha passed away. So that's over 2000 years old. When you take the Tripitaka into your hand, you can guess how old it is. It looks really, really old. Some of the sutras, especially Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra, is written on gold leaves. Some sutras are written on silver leaves, but 99% of the sutras are written on ola leaves. But some of them are like the corners of the pages are turning into like powder, but they are preserving it very well, and I am very grateful to them for doing that, despite all the other things that British sector have done in our country. One good thing they have done is they have looked after our Tripitaka, which is the most important thing as far as the Buddhists are concerned. So this British Library happens to be less than 20 miles from our Udara. So I have been fortunate enough to travel there regularly and read this Tripitaka before the COVID started. And so all the Dhamma points I have taken from there. Now, some of the points that I am explaining from there, you might see, you might realize that they differ from what you have heard or what you have studied already. If that is the case, don't develop an anger or resentment against it. Just practice the principle that Lord Buddha explained in Kalama Sutra. In Kalama Sutra, Lord Buddha said, don't either believe or disbelieve what I say. Just collect all the information that I give you, take it home, analyze it using your intelligence and wisdom, go through it over and over again, revise it several times, and at the end of the day, if you think it is right, you can take it, and if you think it's wrong, just leave it out and carry on with whatever you are doing, but don't develop a resentment or anger against it, or don't come to argue with it. So that's the first point that I like to make. And secondly, now, before I continue the Dhamma discussion from where I stopped, I always recap what we discussed so far very briefly. So we are explaining the Sothapanna Marg. At the first level, Sothapanna is the first level of enlightenment. In other words, path to Sothapanna or Sowan good. In Sri Lanka, they use the word Sowan, it's the shortened word for Sothapanna, but the correct word is Sothapanna. So we are discussing about how to attain Sothapanna as per Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra. Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra was the first sutra that Lord Buddha delivered. Out of this, and that is the first sutra you will find. That is, in my opinion, that is the most important sutra that you will find in the Tripitaka out of the 17,705 sutras that you find in the Tripitaka. So Lord Buddha delivered Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra to his first 5 disciples, known as Panchavaggiya Bhikkhu. And after listening to Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra only, they understood, they comprehended Dhamma and became Sothapanna. Sothapanna means, it's actually 2 words, Sotha, Apanna. Sotha means Nirvana Marga, that's the Noble Eightfold Path. Apanna means arrived. So Sothapanna means arrived at the Nirvana Marga or the correct Marga. So the Noble Eightfold Path has 8 steps, and the person who arrives at the Nirvana Marga or becomes Sothapanna has also attained Sammadikti, the first step of the Noble Eightfold Path. Sang means Raga, Dvesha, Moha. I explained this to you before. I use this Pali word because the English words attachment, anger, and ignorance, they become distorted when we try to explain certain Dhamma points. So better not, I prefer not to use those English words. The English language is very good when it comes to explaining material things, because the Western world concentrated mostly on material things. Whereas when it comes to explaining spiritual things, English language does not have enough words because they didn't do so much research studies into the spiritual side of life, if you like, as we did in the East, especially countries like India, Sri Lanka, Thailand, China, and so on. So this the language that Lord Buddha has used is Magadhi language, and it is also the language that's used by superior beings in Devaloka and Brahmaloka. In the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra, Lord Buddha explained the path to Sothapanna, Sowan Marg. In the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra, he starts saying, Pubbe Ananustutesu Dhammanustu. That means I am explaining your Dhamma you haven't heard before. This is very, very important to get the correct translation of certain points that he explained, because when you look at them first, they appear very simple and straightforward, but they have deeper meaning, like the 11 types of suffering that he explained, such as Jati Dukkha, Jarapi Dukkha, and so on. Then he says, once I have understood Dhamma, I got Chakkung Udapadi, Jnanam Udapadi, Panya Udapadi, Vijja Udapadi, Aloka Udapadi. That is, I got the vision of Dhamma, I got the knowledge of Dhamma, I got the wisdom of Dhamma, I got the science of Dhamma, and I saw the light of Dhamma, and I became Aloka from Loka. Loka means these 31 planes where we circulate until we attain arahathood and go to Nibbana. Nibbana is the Aloka, the opposite of Loka. Then he said, in order to understand this Dhamma, firstly, there are 3 things that you have to do. You have to come out of Kamasukallikan Yoga, you have to come out of Atyakilamatan Yoga, and you have to come to Majjhima Patipada. Kamasukallikan Yoga is living the life of luxury, which Prince Siddhartha did for 29 years while he was a layperson. Then Atthakila Yoga is giving unnecessary suffering to the body, and that's what he did as the Bodhisattva, as an ascetic, if you like, while he was doing this 6 years research program, trying to find the truth. And he has explained that in detail in Arya Parveshana Sutra. Parveshana means research. That's a long sutra. In that, he explains very nicely what he did for 6 years while trying to find the truth. Then thirdly, he said, you have to come to Majjhima Patipada. Majjhima Patipada in most books is translated incorrectly as middle path. But it's not middle path. Majjhima, these words have meaning, you see. People can't just, these European scholars, they couldn't understand some of the words, they took the nearest meaning. Because the first English Tripitaka, which was written by Ray Davis and what's the other guy's name, I forget. And they got the help of a Sri Lankan law student called Mr. Soisa, who was in London those days. And Soisa knew English and Sinhala well, but he didn't have much knowledge of Dhamma. So it was blind leading the blind, and they were trying to find the meaning of Majjhima Patipada. Now in Sri Lanka, Madhyama means central, middle. So Soisa couldn't understand the meaning of Majjhima. He said it's middle. Majjhima means middle. So Majjhima Patipada, they called it middle path. Since then it has been registered as middle path, which is wrong. See, these little things distort Dhamma completely and send people on a wild goose chase. That's why for a long time, people couldn't even become Sothapanna. For about 1500 years, since this Tripitaka has disappeared, I will explain to you in a future discussion how this Tripitaka, the Tripitakas were written down in Sri Lanka over 2000 years ago, where it was done, and how this Brahmin, South Indian Brahmin Gosha, who was sent by the Brahmins in South India to destroy Buddhism in Sri Lanka, and how he set fire to the Buddhist library and destroyed the Tripitaka. And fortunately, the copy was buried underground, which he didn't know. And over about 160 years ago, in 1856 or 1854, an Englishman called George Turner, while he was treasure hunting, he found this Tripitaka at Alulena Rajamaha Vihara in Matula village in Kegol district in Sri Lanka, where the Tripitaka was written down. So fortunately, that Tripitaka was here until year 2000. For some reason, they didn't put it out for inspection. Since 2005, people in Sri Lanka got to know about it, and some of the educated monks who were fluent in English came and took copies of it. And that's how Dhamma reappeared after 1500 years. And this Tripitaka is written down using the Sinhala alphabet, Magadhi language. And now, most of the Magadhi words we can understand. It appears that Magadhi language is very close to Sinhala language. About 40 to 50% of the words in that Tripitaka we can understand without any problem. We don't need a dictionary because those words are already in our language and it's written in our language. So it's fortunately for us we can easily get the correct meanings and understand it better than most people. So Majjhima Patipada does not mean middle path. Majji means getting drunk of raga, desha, moha. Ma means completely eradicating, and path is the way. So Majjhima Patipada is the way that helps you to eradicate raga, desha, moha. If you say middle path, where is the middle path? What is the middle path? You know, about middle path, if you ask the monk, for monks who say Majjhima Patipada is middle path, if you ask them, if you ask 10 different monks, they will say 10 different stories. They cannot give you a specific answer as to what Majjhima Patipada is, because the translation itself is wrong. So anyway, I'm getting carried away with that and spending a lot of time on it. So let me go to the next point. So then Lord Buddha says, uh, to come to Majjhima Patipada, you have to understand the Four Noble Truths. Four Noble Truths are, he said, Dukkham Arya Satyam, Dukkha Samudaya Arya Satyam, Dukkha Nirodha Arya Satyam, Dukkha Nirodha Gamini Patipada Arya Satyam. Meaning, the noble truths of suffering, noble truths of the reason for suffering, noble truths of out of suffering, and the way out of suffering. The Four Noble Truths. Then he says to understand the Four Noble Truths, you have to do four things. The four things are Kalyana Mitra Sevana, Sivisaddharma Sravana, Yoniso Manasikara, and Dhammanudhamma Patipada. Kalyana Mitra Sevana means you have to associate the person, whether it's a monk or a lay person, could be Bhikkhu Bhikkhuni, Upasaka Upasika, as Lord Buddha said. Upasaka is lay Buddhist person, Upasika is female lay Buddhist person, Bhikkhu Bhikkhuni, monk and nun. So it could be any one of those. Kalyana Mitra, a person who is capable of explaining correct Dhamma, which will help you to eradicate Raga Dvesha Moha. Buddhism, Lord Buddha's teachings, Buddhist doctrine is all about eradicating Raga Dvesha Moha. Sabbapapa Sakaranam, then Kusala Sampada, developing, cultivating, and accumulating Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upekha. And such is the Pariyodapanam. Through that you purify your mind and then your wisdom will develop to the highest level and help you to understand the truth about this universe, especially the Four Noble Truths. So, Kalyana Mitra is associating a person who is capable of explaining Dhamma to you, which will help you to eradicate Raga Desha Moha. And secondly, Sivisaddharma Sravana. That means Sravana is listening. You listen to the correct Dhamma taught or explained or discussed with that person. And then the third one is Yoniso Manasikara. Yoniso Manasikara means you go through whatever the Dhamma you have learned already, you go through it over and over again, analyze it, revise it, using your intelligence and wisdom, and you have to comprehend it. Now, Lord Buddha said there are two things that happen here. Jnana in Magadhi language, we use two words, Janato and Passato. So the translation, nearest translation I can give you is Janato means you listen to it, study it, and you learn it. Once you have learned it, then you have to do the Passato. Passato means comprehending and getting a vision of it. That's what he meant by Chakkung Udapadi. I got a vision of Dhamma. That means he became Sothapanna. So to understand Dhamma and comprehend Dhamma, two things that happen there. To understand, you listen to someone, you read books, and so on. But mainly Lord Buddha has said that you have to listen to Dhamma and discuss Dhamma with the person who has comprehended Dhamma. And secondly, then you have to comprehend it yourself, by Yoniso Manasikara. So you go through it and comprehend Dhamma, Yoniso Manasikara. And the fourth one that you have to do is Dhammanudhamma Patipada. That is Sabba Papa Sakaranam, Kusalasya Sampada, Sachitra Pariyodapanam, Esam Buddha Anusapana. Sabba Papa Sakaranam means eradicate all unwholesome deeds. That is unwholesome thoughts, unwholesome deeds, and also unwholesome qualities that you have accumulated throughout your samsara for billions and trillions of years, trillions of lives, and accumulated in your chitta samsana. We briefly discussed chitta samsana and how these things are accumulated. When we come to the fourth noble truth, we will discuss it in great detail and try and understand how this whole mechanism works with wholesome deeds, merit, unwholesome deeds, and see how they get it. By when we come to that point, we would have understood and comprehended most probably how they originate in ourselves, our mind, and then we'll be able to understand, learn and understand and comprehend how they can be eradicated. The question that Melinda asked the other day, Melinda asked the same question in two different angles, how to eradicate this unwholesome deed. So we will come to that. That's the final stage of the Four Noble Truths that we will discuss. We will get there eventually. So, Sabapapastakharana means eradicate all unwholesome deeds, unwholesome thoughts, unwholesome qualities. Kusala Supasampada, that is Prabhadesha Moha. And Kusala Supasampada means cultivate, accumulate, and develop wholesome thoughts, wholesome qualities, wholesome deeds. Wholesome qualities are Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upekka. Now again, I don't use the English words loving kindness, equanimity, and sympathetic joy, because if you use them, it's difficult to convince certain Dhamma points because the meanings are misleading. So let's stick to the Pali words. Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upekka. I explained the meaning of those words earlier. So that's what you have to do. The fourth one is Dhammanudhamma Patipada. So those four things that you have to do in order to understand the Four Noble Truths and come to Sammadikti, which is the beginning of the Majjhima Patipada, right? So it's very logical if you think about it. If you can write it down on a piece of paper, like a flow chart, it's easier to understand because these days people always think in terms of computers, but people don't realize that the people who designed the very first computer, they understood Lord Buddha's explanation on this Dhamma, and they developed the computer according to what Lord Buddha explained, how our mind works, how Vijnana and Prajna work, and how Vijnana and Prajna is created in our mind. They understood that, and instead of developing that to the spiritual side, they developed all the things that Lord Buddha taught. The Western world has taken on so far, but now it's changing. They are going into the spiritual side as well. A lot of them, especially in America, as you know, in 14 states, the 14 states in the West, about the second largest religion is Buddhism at the moment. Now, again, there's a big difference between Buddhism and Buddhist doctrine, which we will talk about later. But Buddhism is, if you like, the nursery of the Buddhist doctrine for the time being, you can say that. So those are the four things that you have to do in order to understand Dhamma, become Sothapanna. And once you are Sothapanna, that means you are going down the correct path. And this is why it is very, very important. Lord Buddha said it is so important to become Sothapanna in this life, because once you have come to the correct path, you won't be doing any wrong things. That will result in your next birth or the birth after next in the four hells. Now here I will describe the 31 words very briefly because it will help you to understand why it's so important to become Sothapanna. But we will discuss about the 31 claims, if you like, or the 31 words, or the 31 realms, the various English words that they use. Because they try to use so many different words, because when you try to explain different points of Dhamma, the first word that they use is misleading. So they use another word and try and explain it. Whereas in Magadhi language, there are words that give the exact meaning. So anyway, if you don't know the language, you have to learn use the English language, and there's no other option, no substitute. So anyway, just a brief idea of what these 31 planes are. Lord Buddha said there are 20 Brahma Lokas, and that's the highest level, 6 Divya Lokas, then the Manusha Loka, and the lowest level, the 4 hells. So Lord Buddha said, if you become out of the six divya loka, he said two are good, four are bad. The two good ones are there for Sothapanna people. If a person becomes Sothapanna, now you will realize as we go on, one can become Sothapanna only in the human world, not in the Divya Loka or not in the Brahma Loka. You will see the reason why. So if a person becomes Sothapanna, he will go to one of the two good Divya Lokas. Why they are good? Because they have the necessary comfort, but not Kamasukallika Yoga, extreme luxury. There's very little suffering, hardly any suffering at all. And most importantly, there's Dhamma there. So they will understand Dhamma. People there, they are mostly always discussing Dhamma, practicing Dhamma. So those superior beings living in the two good developers will continue the Dhamma path until they go up to Brahmaloka and finally the Nibbana. Once they become Sakuddhagami, Sotapanna Sakuddhagami, they can stay in those two Divyalokas. Once they become Anagami, they will go to a good Brahmaloka. Now, and then from good Brahmaloka, there are six good Brahmalokas and 14 bad Brahmalokas. Now, I'll explain to you what these bad Divyalokas and bad Brahmalokas are. So once a person becomes anagami, that's the third level of enlightenment, he goes to the Brahma Loka. In Brahma Loka, Lord Buddha said there's no physical body, only the mind. In Diva Loka, there's physical body, but in Brahma Loka, there's no physical body, only the mind. And there they will attain arhathood, the final level of enlightenment, and then go to Nibbana, and they will not come down to the 31 place again. Now, what are these four bad divya lokas? There are people who do a lot of good things, but with the wrong intention. Their intention is to, they do meritorious deeds. For example, a person is giving dana, and in his mind, he is asking for comfortable life in this life as well as next life, lot of comfort, a lot of luxury, and so on. So these bad divya lokas have lots of luxury, and they are like a nightclub. Everything a person wants to, what they call enjoy life in this world, they are there. But those divya lokas, four bad divya lokas, do not have dhamma. So those who go there, they will enjoy their life, but they will not know Dhamma because they have been engaging in meritorious deeds with the wrong intention. If you do something, whether it's a meritorious deed or unmeritorious deed, especially let's take a meritorious deed, if your intentions are Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upekka, it will help you to become Sotapanna and go down the Nibbana path. But if you do meritorious deeds with Raga, Dvesha, Moha, asking for comfort and enjoyment and luxuries in life, in this life as well as in the future, you will get it. These merits are like money in the bank, you can spend it either way. But the danger of that is this. Now, when a person performs a lot of meritorious deeds, let's say a person gives a lot of dana and accumulate a lot of merit, and he keeps hoping for a luxury life in the next life, in this life as well as next life. So in this life also he will get a lot of material things, but not necessarily peace of mind. He may not necessarily be happy because he will have other problems in his mind. He will have some happiness because he has a lot of wealth. When he thinks about his wealth, he will feel happy, but at the same time, he will feel insecure. What is going to happen to this world, with this wealth? Will I lose it? Will someone will take it away from me? Will I die? What's going to happen to my wealth? And when I die, what's going to happen to me when I die? And he will have more worries than an average person. People like Michael Jackson, you know the story. That's what happened to people like them. So a person who keeps doing a lot of meritorious deeds, and ask for the wrong things, and he will get them. He will go to those four bad developers, and there's no Dhamma. He has no chance of doing any wholesome deeds or earning any merit. All he will be doing is spending the merits that he has accumulated in this world. Until the merits run out, he'll be dancing and drinking and eating and doing all the things that they do in nightclubs and even more. And then once the merits run out, they'll be left with all the sins that they have accumulated in their Chitta Santana. They will fall straight back to the four hells to pay for the sins. And once you go to the four hells, it takes, you know, several eons. A eon could be trillion times trillion years. Lord Buddha has explained the eon. I will explain it in some other time because of the time factor. It's an unbelievable long period of time. And they will have to suffer there because once you go to the four hells are animal kingdom, ghost kingdom, inferior ghost kingdom, and the hell itself. Now, the lowest three we can't see, but we can see animal kingdom. Just imagine the amount of suffering that an animal undergoes, and he does not have a developed mind, and he does not know them. And all he is doing is unwholesome deeds. He's thinking of unwholesome thoughts in his mind all day, and he's putting them into action verbally, physically, and mentally. And he's collecting, accumulating sins every day, large amount of sins, and he has no way of accumulating any merit. So once he dies, he'll be in raga with his life anyway. For example, a cat would like to come as be born as a cat. You know, he likes his life. He wants to be a cat forever. And a dog will like to be a dog forever because he likes that life. No matter what suffering is involved, he doesn't understand. He thinks his life is good. So he will come back as a dog. Cat will come back as a cat. You know, millions and millions of lives. It will be very, very difficult for them to come back to the human world again to get a chance to become Sothapanna. That's why Lord Buddha said, you know, human life is very, very rare. While we are circulating between these 31 planes, he said our Mahagedara, that means our main home, is the four hells. We spend more than 90% of the time. Let's say if we have circulated, let's say 100 eons in this 31 planes, around this 31 planes, 90% of that time, 90 eons, we would have spent in the four hells. We can't remember. Because once you go there, it's impossible, almost impossible to come out of it. Because we can't earn money to come out of it. So that's the danger of engaging in meritorious deeds and asking for the wrong thing. They will go to that four bad developers and enjoy life for a short time. And once they are there, their merits will run out very quickly because they are having lots of comfort. Merits are like money in the bank. So that's why Lord Buddha said the danger. Then the bad Brahmalokas are those who engage themselves in wrong meditation techniques. When you practice wrong meditation techniques, your mind will go blank, especially if you practice this breathing meditation for a long time, as these yogis do. You must have seen yogis if you go to, Himalayas. You don't have to go to Himalayas. You can see yogis on the internet who are sitting down and meditating. Sometimes they sit in one position for days, sometimes weeks, months. They don't need food because they get this, what they call cosmic power from the cosmos or the universe. And they keep enjoying that. And they may get attached to it with raga. And when they die, they go to those Brahmalokas and there's no body. And they just be there. Of course, there's very little suffering involved because only the mind is there. But they are stuck there. They are still living. Until their merits run out, they will live there. And once the merits are over, again in these bad Brahmalokas, they cannot do any wholesome deeds or accumulate or earn any merit. So all the merits that they have brought with them, like money in the bank, they will be spent every day, and it will come to a point where all the money is finished. So all their merits are over. What is left in the bank account is sin. So they will fall into the four hells again to start from the beginning, and they will have to undergo immense suffering. Lord Buddha has explained that in Brahmajala Sutra. He said, don't get caught with the Brahmajala by practicing these meditation techniques. Those are the meditation techniques that our Bodhisattva, while he was Bodhisattva and also the Panchavagya Bhikkhu, practiced trying to find the truth, because those were at that time there were 64 religions in countries like India. India and Sri Lanka were very close, like very one country. And those two countries, they had 64 religions, and these 64 religions had 30 odd different meditation techniques. And all those meditation techniques try to make the mind go blank, stop thoughts coming into the mind. So when that happens, you see, it's true that they are not committing any unwholesome thoughts or unwholesome deeds, but all the unwholesome qualities that they have accumulated will remain in the Chitta Samsara. So it will come to a point once their merit that allows them to live in this human world run out, they will go to one of those bad Brahmalokas. They'll be there for maybe for a long time, maybe a couple of years, and then they will come back to the four hells again. So those two routes, these bad Divyalokas, bad Brahmalokas, are an indirect route to the four hells. Whereas the two good Divyalokas are very good, and only those who become Sothapanna from the human world go there. And in the Divyaloka, you can't become Sothapanna again because you are Sothapanna already. And then from there, they will forget their Dhamma. There's very little suffering there. Everything that they need to practice Dhamma is available for them. And they will practice correct Dhamma. And then they will become Sakuddagami, the second stage. And then the Anagami. Once they become Anagami, they can't stay in the two. They will have to go higher to a good Brahmaloka. And in the good Brahmalokas, again, they will practice Dhamma. And within a short time, very quickly, they will go to Nibbana. So that's we can discuss it in more detail later if you have any questions. I just want to explain that to you in detail because sometimes people will be wondering why should we become Sotapanna, right? Why should we bother? Now, the further explanations I'll give you why it is necessary to become Sotapanna. Because if we don't become Sotapanna by the time we die, we are in the wrong path, right? So we will carry on that way. Either we will go to a bad Brahmaloka, bad Divyaloka, or bad Brahmaloka, and then go to the four hells as the next life, or go straight to the four hells. Either way, if we don't become Sotapanna, we will end up in the four hells either next life or the life after. Lord Buddha has made it absolutely clear because our next birth will depend on the final thought that comes to our mind, which is called Chutta Siddha. And that final thought depends on whether we are Sotapanna or not. If you are not Sotapanna, no matter how many meritorious deeds, even if you have given millions of dana every day, Raga, Desha, Moha thoughts will come to your mind. You will have some desire for something or someone, and at least if you can't think of anyone else, you will at least have Raga thoughts for your own life. Because if you are not Sotapanna, you like to live here forever because you don't know the value of becoming Sotapanna. Once you become Sotapanna, it's like all the baggage that you were carrying all these while, 90% of them you have put down, and you will not be worried to die because you know that you will go to a better place. You know that death is imminent, and it's something that we have to face sometime. Once we know we every person until he becomes Sotapanna, he has a worried mind. He worries about everything because the final point, the bottom line is he's scared to die. He doesn't want to die, right? But once you become Sotapanna, death is like going to sleep tonight and waking up somewhere else tomorrow morning. So it's just an explanation. I just wanted to give you a brief idea. So Lord Buddha has explained that becoming Sotapanna is so important. He gave one example. Once he was with his disciples, he took a little bit of earth from the ground into his hand, and he asked his disciples whether the earth on the ground or the earth in his hand is greater. He said, compare these two, and now if you compare the earth on the ground and the earth in my hand, when you compare these two, the earth in my hand is less than 1%, I mean, fraction of 1%, very little compared to the earth on the entire ground, the entire earth, if you like. Then he said, uh, now, if you compare this to all the people living on this earth, right? Uh, after death, only people equivalent to the amount of soil in my hand will go to a better place. Will go to either a good developer, or will go to good developer, or good Brahmaloka if they have already become anagami. All the others will go to either directly to the four hells or indirectly to the four hells through the bad Divyaloka and bad Brahmaloka. He has explained all this very nicely. We will discuss them later. I just thought I will mention it here because at this stage I want you to understand what is Sotapanna and why it is so important to understand Dhamma and come to the correct path, the Noble Eightfold Path. And when you come to that place, the title you get is Sotapanna. It's like, when you pass the bachelor's degree, you get BSc, Bachelor of Science, that's the title. Similarly, Sotapanna is the title that's given to a person who has comprehended Dhamma and attained Sammaditthi, the first step of the Noble Eightfold Path. Sammaditthi, again, if you ask most people, if you look at the books, the wrong translation they have given, they say correct vision. What is the correct vision? If you ask 10 different people what is the correct vision, they will give you 10 different answers. It's not the correct vision. Sang means Raga Dvesha Moha. Ma means completely eradicating. Ditti means the vision. So it's the vision that teaches you how to eliminate Raga Dvesha Moha completely. That's what we are trying to do. We are trying to eradicate or eliminate Raga Dvesha Moha. Right? Okay, now the next point. We started explaining. We started to explain the Four Noble Truths. We started with the first Noble Truth, the Noble Truth of suffering. In that, we explained firstly 11 types of suffering. Uh, Starting with Jatipi Dukkha, Jarapi Dukkha, and so on. Then we explained Yampi Samna Labati Sampi Dukkha. And last week we discussed in detail the Panchaskandha and Pancha Upadana Skandha. Now, Panchaskandha we discussed in detail. I forgot to mention to you Pancha Upadana Skandha. Upadana means you are attached to it. You see, Panchaskandha is there. Actually, every person who is not Sotapanna is attached to this Panchaskandha. They attach means they like to, they enjoy doing Rupa Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana. When Rupa Vedana, Sanya comes to them, they enjoy doing Sankara. In other words, creating a thought out of it with Raga, Dvesha, Moha, and then end up creating Vijnana. So we discussed all that. So the Panchaskandha, when a person is attached to it, that is called Pancha Upadana Skandha. Basically, the two are almost the same, 99% the same. There's a very little subtle difference. But we don't have to go into all that at this stage. So today, I want to discuss another aspect that Lord Buddha has discussed under this first Noble Truth, which is the Noble Truth of suffering. So the point that I want to discuss today, now before I started to discuss this point, I want to take explain to you what I explained so far. So don't think that I have explained unnecessary things. The point that I'm going to explain today, you need that background knowledge in order to understand the implications of this point and the importance of it. Now, noble truth of suffering, when Lord Buddha talked about suffering, he has explained suffering in so many different angles to make it easier for us to understand what this suffering is all about and how dangerous it is, how important it is to become Sothapanna and come out of this suffering. So the next aspect that he has explained about suffering is he has categorized suffering into three different categories called Dukkha Dukkha, Sankhara Dukkha, and Viparinama Dukkha. The idea of categorizing this is that he explains how these three types of suffering originate from the beginning and how we can eradicate it by taking some simple actions. Excuse me. So dukkha dukkha is any suffering that comes to us as a result of our bad karma in the past. When I say bad karma, those are the things that I explained to you in our Chitta Samsana. In the fourth container, I explained four containers. I said, you know, I'm using this container technique for understanding. The first container contains wholesome deeds, and the second one contains merit. Third one contains unwholesome deeds, and the fourth one contains sins. So these things we have been accumulating them since we were born in this universe, if you like, and in this life, at least 100 years ago. And as we go on from life to life, we keep spending these things by undergoing suffering. Every time when we undergo suffering, some amount of things will go down. But at the same time, the problem is we keep adding more and more things into it by engaging ourselves in unwholesome thoughts and unwholesome deeds. Unwholesome thoughts and unwholesome deeds will earn sin. So this dukkha dukkha is the suffering that comes to us as a result of these things that we have accumulated in our chitta samdhana. So now this dukkha dukkha for this particular point that we are going to explain, Lord Buddha said about 90% of dukkha that we have accumulated can be made null and void. He called them ahosi kamma. Ahosi means making them null and void by doing certain things. Now, to understand this, we have to go to the origin. Now, he said there are two types of things that we cannot make null and void, and we have to suffer for them. The first one is anantariya papa karma, the five big ones. That is shedding the blood of Lord Buddha, a Samma Buddha. Second one is killing an arahat. Third one is killing mother. Fourth one is killing father. Fifth one is Sangha Beda. Sangha means the person who has become Sotapanna. Beda means blocking. So if someone teaches wrong Dhamma to another person who has the capability and the ability to become Sotapanna, which more than 90% of the people have, if they take an interest, and if they have, of course, enough merit from previous life. And if someone blocks his way by teaching wrong Dhamma to him, or stopping him listening from correct Dhamma, or taking away the opportunity of him to listen to correct Dhamma and become Sotapanna, that person, the first person is blocking the way of the second person, or blocking the opportunity of the second person to become Sotapanna, in which case the first person is committing Sangha Beda. Now, in most books, maybe Vaishani has seen, because she has been studying Buddhism at higher level, they say Sangha Beda means putting one monk against another. That is not the case. There's a sutra called Sangha Beda Sutra. Sangha Beda Sutra, this is explained very nicely. Sangha Beda means stopping or blocking the way of a person who is capable of becoming Sothapanna. So, for example, if I teach you wrong Dhamma and send you down the wrong path on a wild goose chase and waste your time, waste your opportunity, I'll be committing Sangha Beda and I'll go to the four hells immediately. So, anyone who commits now, in our case, since we are in the human world now, we have a guarantee that we have never ever committed one of the five big things, the Anantariya Papaka. Anantariya means non-stop. It gives results non-stop until you become arhat. So that if you commit an Anantariya Papakarma, immediately after your death, you will go to the worst hell, in the four hells, and you will suffer there for several eons until the next Samma Sambuddha appears in this world. And then only you will get the opportunity to become a human being and have a shot at becoming Sotapanna or going further. That's what happened to Venerable Moggallana. Vaishani, have you heard of the story of Venerable Moggallana?
Yes, Bhante. Thank you, Bhante.
Yeah, he received the affirmation from the Buddha to become a chief disciple of a future Buddha. But the danger of getting affirmation like that is that, you cannot become Sotapanna until your final life. So if you are not Sotapanna, you are in danger of, you are possible, it's possible for you to commit any type of thing, including Anantariya Pakistan. So unfortunately, Venerable Moggallana, in one life, his wife forced him to kill his parents. And as a result of that, immediately he went to hell. And he was there for several years until Lord Gautama Buddha was born as Prince Siddhartha in this world. That's what happened to him. The same thing happened to Devadatta. Devadatta committed Anantariya Papakarma by rolling a rock at Lord Buddha and shedding his blood. And then he went straight to the four hells. He went straight to the hell, and he's suffering there until next Samma Sambuddha, Maitri Buddha, appears on this earth. So the important point for us is, we have a great relief that we have never ever committed Anantariya Karma. If we did, we would have been in hell and we would never be able to be here where we are now. So that's a great relief. We haven't committed Anantariya Karma. Hopefully, none of us will commit it. For the rest of our samsara, if you become Sotapanna, you will never commit that. And the second category of things that you cannot make null and void to a great extent. Some of them you can make null and void, and that is called Arya Upavada. Arya means a Sotapanna person or someone who has gone about Sotapanna. Upavada means doing something bad, verbally, physically, or mentally. So if you do something wrong, verbally, physically, or mentally, to an Arya, that means someone, whether it's a layperson or bhikkhu, if he's an Arya person, that is, if he's Sotapanna or Sakundagami, Anagami, or Arahat, and if you do something wrong to that person, that's an Arya Upavada. And there's only one way you can make that null and void. If you realize what you did and you go to that person in person, ask him for forgiveness, and he will give you forgiveness because he's not a funny person and he will not hold grudges. And then you will be relieved, or that thing will become null and void. Otherwise, you will have to pay for that also. That is the reason why our Gautama Buddha, when he was Bodhisattva, he had to suffer for 6 years in the forest because in a previous life, when he was a layperson, Obviously, he was not Sothapanna because any bodhisattva cannot become Sothapanna until his last life. Because the Samma Sambuddha is the person who appears in this human world when correct Buddha Dhamma has completely disappeared from the human world, and he will rediscover it by his own wisdom. Obviously, in that life, his name was Gatikara. His story is there in the Tripitaka. What he did was to a Samma Sambuddha, he has insulted him 6 times, saying, some bad, bald-headed man, and how can you preach and all that. 6 times he has said that, and because of that, he had to suffer for 6 years. Even as a Buddha, he had to pay for that Arya Upavada. So these things are no joke. You see, even as a Samma Sambuddha, you have to suffer for it. That's why he had to suffer for 6 years while he was trying to find the truth doing this Arya Parishana. So if we have committed any Arya Upavada, I'm afraid we cannot make it null and void. We will have to pay for it. So that's the only thing that we will have to definitely pay. Other than that, Lord Buddha has said more than about 90% of the sins that the person carries in his chitta samsara, in that fourth container, do not fall into those two first categories. They fall into the other category, and all that 90% or more can be made null and void. And there's a technique, meditation technique. That's what he taught to the person named Angulimala. Vaishani, have you heard of Angulimala?
Yes, Bhante. Thank you, Bhante.
Anyone else who has heard of Angulimala? Sorry, I keep asking Vaishani because she's doing PhD. I assume that she has heard of all these things because some of the other people are beginners to Buddhism. Is there anyone else, just for information, who has heard of a man called Angulimala who killed 999 people and still became an Arahat?
Yes, Bhanteji.
Yes, Bhante.
Yes,
There's just
Bhanteji.
a few for Angulimala. I saw it in Sri Lanka when I was a student, long time ago, when I was about 15 years old, 200 years ago. Just joking. Just testing whether you are sleeping or not. Anyway, sorry, coming back to the point. Uh, and now, Angulimala was the man who killed 999 people. It's a long story. I will tell you some other time. And finally, he was going to kill his own mother. Every morning, Lord Gautama Buddha had a habit of getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. In his meditation, he will see, using one of his wisdom, is there anyone in the world who is capable of becoming Sotapanna or going beyond that, who needs my help today? And that day, for Angulimala's good fortune, he appears to Lord Buddha's vision. So Lord Buddha went to him before he killed his mother. He saved him from there, brought him to the temple, and made him a Buddhist monk. And now this Angulimala, when he became a Buddhist monk, he had killed 999 people. It is a huge thing. But within 3 months, he managed to eradicate all those things from his chitta samsara and go all the way up to Arahattu. So, how did he do that? Now, Lord Buddha explained to him that all the sins, luckily, he did not have Anantariya Papa Karma, which he was about to commit. Had he killed his mother, he would have gone straight to hell and he would still be in hell in partnership with Devadatta. But now, thanks to Lord Buddha brought him, and he had not committed Anantariya Papa Karma. So he was able to, he had some Arya Upavada. For that, he had to suffer even as an Arahat, when he went on his begging ground, Pindapata, begging for food. People threw rock stones at him because people knew who he was, and some of those people lost their relatives. He killed some of their relatives when he was layperson. So he came back to the temple bleeding. several times. That's for the Arya that we committed. Apart from that, more than 99% of the sins that we had accumulated were all, those sins that can be made null and void. Lord Buddha explained to him how to make this null and void. This is the most important thing that we should learn, all of us, you see. Now, Lord Buddha, now this is very logical. Lord Buddha said, now all the sins that we have accumulated in our Chitta Santana, apart from Anantariya Papa Karma and the Arya Pavada, all the rest we have accumulated by doing something wrong, verbally, physically, or mentally, to a sentient being or living being living on these 31 planes or the 31 worlds, if you like. If we can correct this wrong, he said we can correct this wrong by transferring merits to them and wishing them well. You see, that's what we do when we transfer merits. So we transfer merits to them and wish them well. Something good happens to them. So earlier we have done something bad to them. Now we are doing something good to them. So the bad that we have done, once we do enough good, it will compensate for the bad that we have done. And the sin that we have accumulated by doing that bad will become null and void and ineffective. Right? So that's the meditation technique that Lord Buddha taught. I practice that 5 times a day minimum. It takes only 3 minutes. Now, we don't know how many living beings on these 31 planes we have done wrong to. If we have lived trillion lives, in every life we did something wrong to someone, one person, there are trillion people. We don't know where they are, who they are, their names, whatever. So all we have to do is think of all the sentient beings or all the living beings living on these 31 planes and first ask them for forgiveness in our mind. And then transfer them all the merits that we have accumulated. We have lost. Remember, we have not only accumulated things, we have accumulated a lot of merits as well. And those merits, every time when we transfer to others, they will double and triple depending on various things. You know, it's a rule, it's a universal law which Lord Buddha has explained. When you give something, you get more, right? That's why people give dana. So when you transfer your merit, you get more merit. So firstly, we have to ask for forgiveness from all the living beings living in the 31 planes, and then we transfer them merit, and we wish them nibbana. That is the highest wish that we can make to a person. May he attain nibbana. So if we keep on doing that as many times as possible every day, the sins that we have accumulated will gradually get eradicated. And eventually we will come to a point like Angulimala did. What he did was, he practiced this meditation 18 hours a day. Within 3 months, he managed to eradicate all the sins that he had accumulated in present life, in his last life, by killing the 999 people and all the other bad things that he had done. And also, during the past, maybe, 100 years, that could be trillion times trillion lives, that he has accumulated, all the things that he has accumulated, he managed to eradicate all of them, make all of them null and void by practicing this meditation technique. So it's very, 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 very powerful. And Vaishali, have you heard of this making things null and void?
Please pardon, Bhante, once again.
You see now, this is what Lord Jesus Christ was trying to explain to people. He said, Lord, now everyone has accepted, I think, the important people in the world have accepted that Lord Jesus Christ was a Buddhist monk. You know the story. I'm not going to go into it. And he explained this. Now, even today in the Christian society, they have this tradition or practice of asking for forgiveness for their sins. And that comes from our Buddhist teaching. They are not doing it 100% right, but there's some effect on what they are doing. They are getting some results out of it. So we have to do it correctly. We have to ask for forgiveness. But Christians don't have a system of transferring merits or tradition of transferring merits. They only ask for forgiveness. That is not complete, but they have some results out of it. But the complete way of doing it is we have to ask for forgiveness first, then transfer our merits to them. Don't worry about transferring merits. Always be generous with transferring merits, because more you give, more you will get. You will never run out of merits by giving them to others. So you transfer merits to them and wish them inbound. So by doing that, you can eradicate more than 90% of the things that you have accumulated in that fourth container in your chitta samsara, and the troubles that come to your mind will gradually disappear, and you will feel so happy, so content, so light, a feeling, a great feeling, good feeling, which you did not have before. So that is very, very important. So that dukkha is called dukkha dukkha. And if you have any questions, you can ask your questions during the Q&A time. Then the second type of dukkha is sankhara dukkha. Third one is viparinama dukkha. So here mainly the main focus is identifying how we accumulate these things, why these suffering comes to us as a result of accumulation of sin, and how do we get rid of it and get rid of this suffering. The first one is dukkha dukkha. Second one is sankhara dukkha, which is followed by viparinama dukkha. Viparinama dukkha is, if you like, the second part of sankhara dukkha. If you earn a sankhara dukkha, that means it will be followed by a viparinama dukkha. Sankhara dukkha means in the present moment. Sorry. If you commit a sankhara, now we talked a lot about sankhara. Sankhara means doing things with raga desha moha, mentally, physically, or verbally. So if we do a sankhara, we are earning the things which will give us bad results, meaning suffering. Let's take an example to explain that. So let's say we develop an attachment to our car or our house, which is a sankhara. And as a result of that, what is going to happen is, when that house or car is going into decay or getting destroyed or coming to an end, it will give us suffering. Sankhara dukkha is, firstly, once we buy the car, it's an expensive car. We have to, if we can't afford it, we get a car loan. We have to pay for it. We have to work harder. We have to pay for the insurance. We have to look after it. We will worry about it, whether someone will damage it when we park and so on. So that's sankhara dukkha. Then the viparinama dukkha comes when the second part of it, when the car goes into viparinama. Viparinama means, it's getting old, going into decay, going into breaking down and so on. That will give us suffering. So how to stop the sankhara dukkha and viparinama dukkha is, Lord Buddha said, it's so simple. All you have to do is stop committing sankhara in the present moment, right? Stop doing silly things with raga desha moha, and then sankhara dukkha and viparinama dukkha will not come to you, right? So here he has explained one important way of eradicating our sins that brings us suffering, right? But not the wholesome deeds and unwholesome deeds. That is sabba papasta karanam kusala sukha sampada. Here we are talking about sins, sankhara dukkha and viparinama dukkha. That the sins that we accumulate as a result of our unwholesome deeds. How to eradicate them? The sins that we have accumulated over a long period of time, as well as the sins we create and accumulate in the present moment. How to eradicate them, Lord Buddha has explained here. I hope it's clear to you. So Sankara Dukkha, Dukkha Dukkha, Sankara Dukkha, and Viparinama Dukkha. Those are the three things that I wanted to explain to you.